everybody, welcome to the Guys Learning Japanese podcast. What's going on, Nick?
Not much. What's going on with you?
Not too much. So let's get straight to it. So for today's topic, nowadays, the age of the internet, it seems that a lot of people are using anime or Japanese dramas or Japanese TV shows to study Japanese. So I would like to compare this kind of media with real talk, the real Japanese. Are they the same or are they different? What do you think, Nick?
I think I think they are different. I mean, even at its most basic, the amount to which more overt uses of the words "you" and "I" and "those guys" and "these guys" and those sorts of words. There's just so many of them in Japanese, but I think they're a lot more commonly used, especially in anime and in video games and even in dramas, I think, than what they are in real life. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I 100% agree with that. I think I mentioned in a previous podcast how some people thought my Japanese was too girly at one point, and then I started using more aggressive media to learn manly talk, guy talk. And in English, basically, they were saying you in just about all contexts, but in Japanese, they were saying things like omae, teme, anta, kisama, things,
Kisama.
yeah, things like that. I honestly, I could kind of tell by the context that I should never use something like that, kisama. But just in normal conversation, sometimes with people I first met, I would casually use omae or
Yeah,
casually
yeah,
use anta. And at
yeah,
the time, I could tell by their facial expression that it wasn't a good thing to do. It was a faux pas during a
yeah.
first meeting.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I'm lucky because I tended when when I was back a bit when I was maybe in a more beginner stage of learning Japanese, I was super cautious. Maybe a lot of people had given me sometimes incorrect advice about the fragility of the Japanese person's soul, and that they will just crumble if you ever refer to them, with the word "you" or something like that. And so maybe I took it a little bit too much to heart, but one thing that it did do that was useful is it meant that I didn't go into situations referring to people as "omae" or "kisama" or something similar to that. Yeah, but as for I think the languages are different. I mean, and the languages between those different media are different. Uh, in regards to whether or not they're useful, I think they're absolutely useful. I mean, this is just my opinion, but I think a lot of those people who are online saying that you really shouldn't be learning Japanese from anime and you really shouldn't be this and kind of pointing the finger at people who are. I personally don't agree with those types of people, and I think whatever works. I think if you really like anime, then that's a great way to learn Japanese. I mean, it's not the only way to learn Japanese, and I think if you only watch anime, you'll come out with a slightly skewed idea of what Japanese is, but there is different kinds of anime, so there are all different types. So, I mean, I don't know, I might be wrong. It might not actually be
No,
skewed. Yeah.
that's actually what happened to me. Initially, all of my exposure was through this kind of media. I was digesting it, and I thought I was understanding it. But when I came to Japan and I started using this kind of language that I had digested, it kind of threw me into a few situations that were a little uncomfortable. So adjusting from that point was the key step for me. because in comparison to other people who first come here, maybe some people they can't communicate at all. That's completely different in terms of someone who just seems like a dick or someone who's rude.
Yep.
For some foreigners that Japanese people they may be dealing with, they might be thinking, "Oh, another English speaker. I can't speak English. I don't want to deal with this guy." But for me, they were probably thinking, "This guy's really scary. Why is he talking like this?"
Yeah, yeah.
He's also a foreigner. But it just kind of surprises some people. I think as a foreigner, maybe they're a little more forgiving. If you're a Japanese people talking in such a way, it might be worse. But as a foreigner, I think they're a little more forgiving. But ideally, that should not be your only material for studying. It should be like a supplement.
Yeah, I tend to think though that it's a bad idea. To be learning Japanese, as we both know, is hard enough as it is. So I would always recommend people to learn from anime if they really love anime. If they're nonplussed towards anime to begin with, I'd probably say, hey, stick to books or stick to real conversation or stick to whatever it might be, blogs or something, like whatever is more of a preferred way to study over anime. But
I
but
disagree
it
with that, though. I think at the
yeah.
beginning, something, as long as you're interested in it, some kind of show, or whether it's anime or like some drama or something, I think you should be watching that so you can master the phonetics and
Oh yeah, that's a
master
good point. Yeah.
master the pronunciation rather than learning something that's in a textbook that people probably don't say. Yes, you can get structure from the textbook, but I think starting with anime or any kind of media where you see Japanese people interacting together, I think is better than words on paper
Yeah,
at the
yeah, yeah,
beginning.
okay. Yeah, yeah, no, that's a good point.
Because
That's a good point. Phonetics is really important.
yes,
Yeah,
because at
obviously.
least in that situation, you also see the context. Like
Yeah.
I think maybe rather than paying too careful to the subtitles, I think you should probably pay more attention to the social context because I think that is what's key. A lot of people, when they're watching like Japanese TV shows or anime or something, maybe they're really focused on the subtitles and listening to the Japanese, but I think you should be more sociologically mindful of the context because oh, look at this situation, there's a boss and there's a new employee, look at how they're talking to each other. Just being aware of things like that, they're usually not present in a textbook, and
Yep.
I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, yeah. It's also I just think that people aren't stupid. I mean, if it's clear though that the anime is totally absurd. I mean, that you can see visually, it's like a if you're learning English, it's like you would know. Surely the person who's trying to learn English, surely the person would know that if they were going to sit down and watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, then they should probably not really think they're going to learn much, good quality English from that. Because, I mean, you would find out pretty soon that it's filled with absolutely nonsense words, which you look up a bunch of them in the dictionary and they don't, then, cowabunga doesn't really appear, for instance.
Yeah.
And so, like, you would get to a point where, characters are saying, like, totally tubular and things like that, that you might just think, okay, this isn't really sort of real English. I just think that, a lot of this poo-pooing, as it were, of anime is it's a bit over the top. I think anime, in most cases, I think is pretty good to learn from. I think it's maybe it's not 100% pure. It's got maybe 20% you know, it's 20% maybe tainted by strange anime only language or something like that. But just the same as sci-fi is, or
Yeah.
something like that. But I always think of it as like English, like when I was growing up, I didn't read all that many books, but I used to play almost non-stop video games, and in particular RPGs, and and point and click adventures and games that had stories. And yeah, I mean, I think that my whatever it might be, like my vocabulary or diction or whatever it might be, is perfectly reasonable. It might even be above average. And so the to consider that there's no benefit at all from these kinds of quote unquote fun media is just, it's just like a bit, it's just a bit weird.
Right. I know there's a lot of negativity towards it. I think people should definitely see the value in it because I think it's better than textbooks in most cases.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
the most important thing is to be mindful of the context.
It sounds a bit sort of silly that here we are, talking about, well, at least I am talking about, why people should study anime and why they shouldn't be listening to people online. But here we are saying, oh, don't study textbooks. It sort of seems like we're not very conscious of that we're doing that. But I personally am very conscious of why I'm saying no to textbooks. And I think it just comes down to the simple fact that textbooks, for the most part, are not made necessarily by native Japanese people for native Japanese people. I think because they're made for foreigners learning Japanese, and often they're actually made by foreigners who have learned Japanese, native English speakers. I think it's for that reason that they're not they're not sort of pure. If you go into a Japanese bookstore, if you happen to live in Japan, and then you see a book which is made for Japanese people learning English, you'll see the same thing. You'll see that there's plenty of examples of English that they are touting as being, good quality English sentences, and these are grammar which are commonly used, etc., etc. But from your extensive English history that these are expressions that you've probably just never heard before. And so, or, there might be vocabulary in there that, you maybe use once in your whole life. And I'm sure, Derek, you've personally seen examples of Japanese people learning English, and you've seen them studying a word that you just think that's ridiculous that they're studying that word. I mean, it's just such a it's like maybe a word from the medieval times or something like that, um,
Yeah, there
like
there's
like
so many
doff or something.
examples. There's so many
Yeah,
examples of it. I think that's a really good comparison.
yeah, and so I think that what happens, so I think you can see that if you happen to be in Japan and you happen to go into a bookshop, and I think it's just the same. We just, most people just don't happen to realize it because they tend to think that textbooks are the bee's knees. Yeah. So, have you used many anime during your history to level up your Japanese?
Yes, I have actually. I think the first anime that I started watching kind of as an interest, but also as a supplement to help me with Japanese. I think it was probably Naruto. When I started watching Naruto, I think maybe they only had 50 or so episodes released. I was a university student and I was watching the episodes online, and a lot of them I just watched over and over. Uh, I was trying to be able to understand the content without the subtitles. Obviously, at that time, I was very low level. I was beginner Japanese. So the first time I watched the episode, I was relying heavily on the subtitles. And after I went through so many episodes, so many times, it just decreased. My reliance or my dependency on the subtitles just went down greatly.
And is that because you were stopping every line and listening to the sounds and jotting them down and looking them up in a dictionary, or
No,
what
not
helped to
not at
decrease
all.
it?
Not at all. Like I watched an episode and then I watched it again. Like I
Mm.
never paused it, I never stopped it or anything like that. I just tried to
Yeah.
catch it as it was. I never
It
tried to
makes
slow
it
it
it's one
down.
of the most beautiful cases of your brain subconsciously working things without your conscious awareness. I think it couldn't be more true just how powerful our subconscious is than in something like that. I mean, I remember, I copied the audio. I often do this. I copy the audio onto like my computer from an anime or from a movie or something, and sometimes I'll be listening to the episode, just in the background while I'm washing dishes or something, and I can't understand what they're saying, and then I notice that after a month, I'm not continuous listening, obviously, but after a month of having it in amongst a playlist of a whole bunch of other dramas or movies or whatever it might be, I come back to the same thing, and it just seems to make sense now. And I haven't done necessarily anything to study that line, that moment in that movie directly, but it's somehow broken apart now, and I can see all the pieces and how they're playing together. And I understand the context so perfectly now that it just seems obvious what they're saying now. It's just a remarkable thing that our brain is capable of.
Yeah, you're in that situation. I think you're learning it more like a first language speaker, like as if you're a native.
Mm.
Uh, for me, though, one problem that I ran into is through Naruto and through gaining proficiency through this at the beginning, because at this time I wasn't really watching anything else. I was just following the textbook and watching this. And this Naruto was drastically different from what was in the textbook.
Oh yeah.
So sometimes I could understand what people were saying, Japanese people, like Japanese friends, but then when I responded in Japanese that was somewhat similar to the Japanese in that show, sometimes, not always, but sometimes I would get strange reactions, like you said this too strongly, or you pronounced this word too strongly. Uh, so that was kind of a problem from that show. But I was living with some Chinese roommates at that time, and one day I saw my roommate playing this game on his computer, and it was Go, Ego. And I
Mm.
just asked him, like, what are you playing? And he kind of explained it to me, but I didn't really understand the rules from his explanation because he's ESL student, still learning English. But he said, "Oh, okay. Here on my hard drive, I have a bunch of episodes from a show that explains it." And he lent me the hard drive, and on the hard drive there were a bunch of episodes of Hikaru no Go. Have you ever heard of this show?
No, no. It's interesting though. Is that an anime which is all about Go?
Yeah, it's an anime about Go. And at the time, I never really, I wasn't that interested in Go. I think I started talking to him about it just to try and, befriend my roommate. Because at that time, we weren't really that close, but I was just trying to make conversation with him. But I borrowed that hard drive from him, and then I just started watching it, and I got really into the show.
Mm.
And I really became interested in Go. And this show was a lot more realistic in terms of Japanese. Like the Japanese was very much more natural. Like
Mm.
if you were to mimic the Japanese in this, it wouldn't be strange at all. Like some of the characters in the show, like they go through stages. The characters, they start initially as elementary school students, like I think grade 6 or something, but then they go up until like high school, and even during this show, like through the phases that the characters go, you can notice that their Japanese changes, their diction changes, how they speak, and their vocabulary, everything, it changes. And that was really useful for me because it
I
gave me a
think,
much more
yeah,
natural Japanese.
I think that's a great thing. You know, that often it might just be a case of choosing shows which are basically made for, you know, for smarter people. They're made for, they might be made for grown-ups, or they might be made for, you know, slight older than maybe the target demographic of a show like Naruto. And so yeah, you get all the advantages. I'm actually finding a similar thing with Uchu Kyodai. I'm watching at the moment. Now that's filled with obviously words, you know, based on planets and words to do with astronomy and things like that. And so obviously there's a certain aspect of it, there's a certain amount of it which, you know, is kind of quite really quite beyond me. But then there's obviously a whole drama to the show as well. And I find that most of the drama that happens in the show is all just really natural Japanese, made for grown-ups, you know, who just like a good story. And so I'm finding that it's really like a rewarding anime to be watching as far as, you know, Japanese. I'm learning lots of good quality sort of serious words, you know, like disqualification, elimination, and lots of sort of similar words to that, you know, sort of more, you know, like specific words and words which are more technical and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, how about we discuss like what have been some of the beneficial shows, whether it be like anime or TV dramas or movies? What shows have been really helpful for you learning Japanese?
Okay. Well, one that I would highly
Just off the top
recommend.
of your head, sorry.
Yeah, sure. One that I would highly recommend as far as anime is a show called, it's fairly new, it's called Shirokuma Cafe. Now, this is a show that's, I know from the kids at school, is commonly watched by sort of maybe 2年生, 3年生, or I should say second year or second grade, third grade, fourth grade, up around that area. And it's one of those shows, you know, that so I think it can appeal to older people as well, to older kids as well. The show is very cute. It's very nice. It doesn't have necessarily super cute Japanese though, like a lot of shows do, and it's not too squeaky, you know, with its voices and things like that. And it's a really just like a, you know, it's just about these animals that come into this cafe and they just have everyday conversations with each other, and there's lots of jokes and things like that. Anyway, the point why I like it is just because it's so simple. The Japanese, if you're a beginner student and you watch this show, I think almost everyone can get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and it's really addictive because you're like, you know, you just keep on going, keep on going. Each episode's only 20 minutes, and there's 50 or so of them, and then you can just keep on going, and each one is fairly simple. Uh, you know, you get like a drama, and it makes you feel like, hey, I'm actually watching a native Japanese show in native Japanese. And I don't think it didn't, certainly when I was watching it, it didn't make me feel stupid. It made me feel smart. It made me feel good, like this was a good decision, and I really liked this show.
So,
Yeah.
do you think it would be similar to something like Sazae-san?
Yep, yeah, I think that's a good, yeah, like a good comparison. Yeah, I can't really think of a good comparison maybe in English, but it's not too, the show isn't too serious,
It's
and it's
kind
not
of
too,
about everyday life, things like
yeah,
that.
yeah, and so it's just natural. And sometimes, you know, obviously just like in any show, there's sometimes people say things which are a bit unnatural or whatever, or there's characters which speak a bit strangely or something like that. But most of the Japanese is pretty natural, and it's just a fun show.
It's good.
How about yourself?
For beginners,
or any level?
well, other than the shows that I just mentioned, so Naruto, Hikaru no Go, I think Hikaru no Go is pretty good. It's of the shows that I've watched, I think it's one of the best because it's not too hard. But if you're intermediate or maybe a bit higher, maybe you could watch something like Death Note. In terms
Oh,
of
really?
storyline and entertainment value, it's really good. But the Japanese in it is also very mature. It's very adult. For the majority of the characters in this show, they're speaking in a way that's very professional. It's like a work environment. So if you're a beginner level, it may be a little hard because there's some very technical terms related to crime. Uh, like think of it as something like watching Law and Order or like CSI in
Yeah,
English.
yeah,
Like it might be a little hard if you're a beginner,
yeah. Of course.
but the language in it and the pronunciation and the intonation, it's very natural. It's not strange at all.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, that's for anime. I'd say that's another good one.
yeah. I
There,
haven't. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
I just wanted to say there are a lot of anime, and my recommendation is just to find a show you like, and then be aware of the context. If you
Yeah,
think the context is a little strange, maybe it's not going to be that useful for you. But if the context is something like people working in an office and you happen to work in an office, maybe it's going to be useful for you.
yeah, yeah. At the same time, uh, I think that's absolutely great advice. Don't get me wrong, but I personally wouldn't throw out a show just because it has a weird context. If it happens to be set on a battle star, like on some kind of like spaceship, floating through space or something, and you think that's a weird context which isn't natural. But if you still like the show, like I said in the beginning, Japanese is it's hard enough. I think just take what you can. Like if you like it, then that's wonderful. I mean, that's got to be better than studying a show that you don't like just because you think it's more natural or because you think it'll help your Japanese in the long run more. I think it's probably better off to absolute self gratification now, at all times. And suddenly you'll wake up, and of course you'll be actually watching more because you actually enjoy it, and then I think you'll wake up 5 or 6 or 10 or however long it takes years later, and it would have felt fun along the way, and you'll have Japanese fluency to boot.
Mm-hmm. So far, we've only talked about anime, so we don't want to sound too much like some internet anime freaks. So, how about we use something that's a little more realistic? How about like a TV show or a movie? How about favorite movie or favorite TV series?
Favorite, yeah. I haven't watched too many TV series actually. It's something I haven't really, cracked yet. I haven't really. I think I will get into that scene. I watched a show called Mother, which is about a lady who sort of, I guess, she kidnaps a girl because the girl is being abused by her real parent, and she sort of runs off, and it's all about the trials and tribulations this lady and this kidnapped girl who actually likes this lady, that they go throughout the however many episodes there are. It's quite a short show. It's very, very, very dramatic, as you can imagine, from the just based off the the kind of the idea. And yeah, I quite liked it. It's got really good. It's got very natural Japanese, and it was a really good show. I learnt a lot from it. But for some reason, it might be because, as I said to you in the last podcast, the first book I ever read was last year. The first anime I ever watched, for the purpose of study, was last year, etc. So I'm actually fairly new to this whole Japanese media, so maybe I'll get into dramas at some point later on. So you probably have a lot more to say on it than me. Do you have any, recommendations for dramas or movies?
Yeah, I could recommend a lot actually.
Yeah, I should
I'll just
probably
mention a
get some
few
of
though.
those. Yeah, yeah, go on.
Um, in terms of something that was popular and that may be useful for your Japanese, that was recent, I would recommend Hanzan Naoki. This is a series about an accountant, and there was a scandal in the bank that he was working at. Uh, Obviously, it's not for elementary school students or junior high school students. It's a little more mature, but I think younger people, like younger kids or people who are beginner Japanese students, they could try watching it. It would be a good cultural lesson, but it's a little hard. Maybe it's better for like upper intermediate or advanced. That, of course,
Hmm.
that's if you don't have subtitles. If you have subtitles, I guess you could watch it as a beginner, but it might be a little hard. Uh, but one of my personal favorites for a series that would probably be a show called Miseinen. Miseinen. I think it's probably like 15 years old or something. I watched it with my wife a few years ago. She remembered it when she was a kid. It was really good. It's about some high school students, and one student kind of commits a crime, and it's about these high school students that run away, and they're all very different. Like you have a very different demographic of people getting together and bonding together while they're running away from modern society into the countryside. It's a really good show. It's very dramatic, but I really liked that show. I'd like to watch it again.
Yeah, that sounds. They both of those shows sound good. I'll look forward to checking out both of them.
hmm So how about
Um,
a movie? Were there any
um,
movies that you really liked?
yeah, well, obviously, I went through my typical thing. I think a lot of people do of digesting all of the Ghibli films, and then uh, after that, yeah, I mean, I've had a bunch of movies. The Trying to think of some off the top of my head. Oh, how about you go first, and I'll think about it for a minute.
Okay, you very conveniently slid away from the attack on that one. Uh, so movies. How about Akunin? Akunin, that was a pretty good one. It's a very serious story.
That sounds. Is that
Yeah.
I mean, is that what bad people? Is that what it means?
Well, I guess literally yes, but it's not really. It's not a terrible story. It's nothing like that. It's a drama, and it's about misinterpretations.
Hmm.
Like sometimes you think people are bad, but they're actually not, and sometimes you think people are good, but they're actually not.
Yeah.
It's all about how we perceive people. It's a really good movie. It's a very serious story. Um, it's another good one. I liked. There's so many. I'm trying to think of recent ones, but I don't know. Okuribito. That one was pretty
Yeah, yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah. I've heard a lot of good things about that.
Another one, Kokuhaku. It's not a love story. It's
It,
about
it certainly sounds like
yeah.
it.
Don't get too excited.
Yeah.
It's about kids, and there was kind of an incident at a school, and it's about a teacher trying to find out the truth, or I think it was the mother actually. I'm not sure. I can't remember, but it's about trying to find out what actually happened.
Have you noticed that almost every show that you've recommended has some kind of incident happening? Like,
What can I say? I'm drawn to the trouble. uh,
yeah. Yeah, well, as for me personally, I had some movies that I watched there for a while that I watched with my girlfriend at the time. And for example, I watched the kind of classic. It's called oh man, just what's it called? Ima, what is it? Aini Yukimasu or something like that. Do you know that one?
No.
Ima Aini Yukimasu. And then that's a kind of I guess a classic love story. And then there's another one that was just called
That's why I
Sono
avoided it.
Toki Sono Toki wa Kare ni Yoroshiku.
Yeah, that sounds
That's a,
bad.
that's another like kind of lovey soppy one. And
Did
yeah,
you
this
choose these or was it her?
no, it was her. I remember going to the video shop and saying to her that you know, which one should I get? You know, you know, for learning Japanese and stuff. And so of course she just picks out all of the kind of soppy love sort of dramas.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
it's too bad you didn't see something like have you ever heard of the movie Outrage?
No.
It's well, Takeshi Kitano.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
It's one of his movies. It's just about yakuza.
Okay.
It's pretty recent. I think it's 2 years old or so. I think it was released in 2011, 2012. But it's too bad she didn't choose something like that.
Have you seen many movies that are actually say American movies originally but have been dubbed? Have you done that often?
So you mean not remade, but actually just dubbed?
Yeah, that's right. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Actually, quite a
yeah,
few. Like I'll watch like CSI dubbed and Gossip Girl dubbed with my wife.
yep,
Shows
yeah,
like that. It's kind of interesting. I think it's really strange how they over enunciate the Japanese to try and make it sound like foreigners speaking Japanese. I think it would be a lot better if they just spoke Japanese normally, but I
yeah.
guess it loses its exotic touch that way.
I've actually found there to be some benefit to that. I mean, because there's been particular films which I've really loved, you know, before I started learning Japanese, and then I had the like I've kind of gotten them in Japanese, and because I know the movie in English, you know, I know just about every line. It feels like I can watch it in Japanese, and I get this beautiful like, oh, so this is how you say all this stuff in sort of, it's like I've fought half the battle because I already know all the context. I know everything that happens. I know the way that this whole drama unfurls, and so I've actually found it pretty beneficial. It's like half of the problem of watching a new movie, especially in Japanese, and you know, trying to figure out what's going on in the story and all that sort of, you know, just all solved already, and you just get to sit back and listen to the Japanese and see how it all sounds.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think we're running a little bit overtime today. We're about 8 or 9 minutes over our usual time, so let's wrap it up here.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, thanks for listening to the Guys Learning Japanese podcast. Send your questions to gljpodcasts@gmail.com. We'll answer your questions on the show.